Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining today. The title of today's webinar is How to Handle Threats in SAP Transport Management. Our presenters today are Clemens Guter and Ralph Kempf, and they will introduce themselves in just a moment, but first I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. If you have any audio issues during this webinar, click on Preferences and then Audio. From there, you can check to see if you are using the proper audio device. You can click on the play sound to check if you can hear the audio coming through your speakers. This presentation will take approximately 30 minutes, and there will be a Q&A session following the presentation, so please type any questions into the question Q&A box for our speakers to answer at the end of the event. To prevent background noise, everyone is on mute. And with that, I'll turn the time over to Clemens and Ralph.
Thank you, Stephanie. Yeah, Clemens Gütter, my name. I'm product manager for vulnerability management in Pavlok and transport scanning and code scanning. And I will be the main speaker for today. On my side, I'm glad to have Ralph Kempf. He is our ABAP solutions lead global with many years of security experience, and he will support me especially in question part. So you know you're dealing today. Then I want to add some points to Pavlok for those who don't know us. And we are the market leader in protecting critical business applications. We have like 1,300 customers. We support cloud and on-premise applications. And next slide, please. And our suite contains data around application security, which is one of my parts, for example, but also the user access and data and transaction part. And so we have an all-in-one solution we can provide for our customers. But just some words for today's, our company, and to us, the main topic today will be, the next slide, the SAP transport management. Today, we want to start to give you a small introduction into SAP transports at all, and what are the challenges, what are the weak points, and to give you just a high-level overview in the start. In the next step, click please. In the next step, we will describe you a potential attack. I also have a little video which shows such an attack, and just using a transport. And in the main third part, we will click, please. We will discuss the theoretical layer of protection. There's some model I want to share with you, and what solutions are in place, especially building by SAP and what Pavlok is offering. So far to the agenda, to the roadmap for today. I want to start with the transports, give you a little introduction into it. That's the next slide. What is the next? What is such a transport? It's like a truck who delivers some consumables, whatever, and it's just container who can deliver objects between systems. Normally it's used to transport, for example, some coding, patches, even whole products, SAP standards, but also partner and so on. But also database content, you can transport roles, and you can transport user, and many more. It's like you can put everything in a transport what is part of an SAP system. It's important to have such a way to deliver things, just to have a consistent landscape between, for example, the development landscape, secure quality assurance landscape, and the production landscape. The next slide, please. What is the life cycle of such a transport? Usually it's created in development system because, for example, changes on coding will be in development system, afterwards tested in QA and then delivered to production. But also building roles and so on, everything should be in development system. After the development is finished, the transport is released in the development system and exported into a file in the transport share. Each system should be or should have access to this share and will then scan if it's a new data and import it into the queue of the QA system, for example. And depending on the configuration, it's auto-importing or whatever the rules are behind, somehow it will be imported. And next slide. The transport is completed. No, it was one too much. The transport is completed as soon as all the systems got their delivery, and the coding is then automatically, after importing for each system, activated, for example, for coding, but also if you transport a role, the content is there. In some cases, there needs to be something manually steps behind, but first the data is there at the moment where the import happens. This is important for the whole process, also to get the challenges behind. What's my next point? I want to go a little bit more into challenges. So first, I want to go into challenges in the development system. The development system usually has the problem, but also the need of a wide range of authorizations for developer. And developers need to be able to debug, for example. They need authorizations to add something to a transport. And they need this authorizations to work, but it's also a threat. Sorry for the noise in my background. But it's also a threat which can open this whole problem here. But there's no real good solution for this authorization part. What's also an issue, many customers, many development systems has a lower security restriction. For example, you do not need a security concept approved for just testing something. And it's also a playground for the developers, but this playground has access to the production at the end with these transports. And the third point I want to mention here is that the content of a transport is not very transparent. From time to time, especially if you have some coding things inside, you have thousands of objects in one transport. And if you are just looking as a human being, what contains such a transport, it's really hard to decide if it's a threat or if it's just everything legit. Next, please. So after the development is finished, we have the first real entry or real point where we stop this and where we can add some measurements into the quality and the threat analysis. This is the export. The export is the moment where the transport is finished in the development system. The piece list of this transport is finalized. You know what is inside. And if possible, somehow you can stop here the transport and just bring it to a dead end, so it will never reach the next landscapes. Can go to next. And the last point, which is important on this life cycle, is the import, because it's the very last point where you can make some measurements, where you can make some scans. And here it's really required that you filter all threads, because if it's not filtered here, it's imported into the system. So the main 2 points where we need to be sure that threads are detected are this export and this import part. So next step, please. What I want to tell you now, since you are knowing now what is this transport and what are the challenges, an example of an attack. I have here some attacker. It might be someone from inside, but it could also be due to the low restrictions from outside, who wants to needs or he needs access to the financial part, for example, to just get rid of its debts. And he places an Trojan horse in this transport. For example, in our example, he will just get access of a password. And he adds this password hash of a user into this transport. If you go next, what user is sufficient? In this case, it's some financial supercontroller who has access to all these transactions. And what's his aim? He wants to become this financial supercontroller. So here now, you can click next. He now exported this transport. Can I click next? Thank you. He exported this in transport, and at the moment where it's imported, this is the next step, the financial supercontroller has not longer access to his account. It's now the attacker who is the financial supercontroller. And at this moment, it's open to do everything what he wants to because he has the full access. Maybe you should have some restrictions that not one person has all these roles, but for this example, it's an easy part here. Can you show next? Just a little sum. What's happening? The attacker changed the password hash of a user using, for example, a report. So he can maybe also restore the old one. He adds this hash to a transport. He releases the transport. It could also be executed by someone else. Doesn't need to be the attacker. He restores, he restores the old password hash to avoid any attention. And as soon as it's imported, he has access to the system. In the next step, I've prepared some video. I will just show you or describe what happens here. And afterwards, we will show you this. I created a user on our S4 system, which has a password. It's a little bit hard to see, but let me in, 1, 2, 3. And I will show you, you can log in with this password. Afterwards, I will import.
Clemens, would you like to share your screen?
No, it's a video. You can just make it happen after. I just want to describe what you will see. And then this video you should be able to run. Afterwards, I will import and transport, which I prepared before, which contains a password hash for this user. And I will show you cannot longer log in with let me in, but you need the password. It is open for hacks. And that's the point I want to mention here. This attack is really easy to execute. It took me like 1 minute. And so let's show you this attack, please. So now I log in with the first password. It's happening. I log off and switch to the transport import. I just prepared here everything and imports this request. It only took a moment. And when I now try to log in again with the old password, it's blocked because the password is not correct anymore. And if I take the other one, it will work. And the attacker has no access. Like I said, if you know what you are doing, it took you like 1 minute or something like this, and you can have access as everyone you want to be as a developer. But now, since you are knowing there is a threat, I want to go a little bit more in the more important part, how to secure your system. And for this, next slide, please. Next, it was correct. And now next, I prepared the layers of protection first. The first layer, can you go next? The first layer is the so-called Rbac layer. It's the role-based access control. It just means that everyone should only have the roles he needs to work with, because it's easy if you only have a couple of developers, for example, who has developer access. Only this couple of people are ready to make such an attack. And sometimes, especially in development systems, it's lazy, the role concept, and everyone has a lot of authorizations, then it's way more a threat than if you have, for example, only 10 people. Next layer will be the ABAC. It's the attribute-based access control. This means you can add a layer where, for example, you add only an IP range, which is allowed to do something. You can make it only a location based on the master data, some job title, whatever. Then you can combine these two parts to have a more layer of, or a more solid layer of protection. But it's only some attributes here and some roles so far. It's easy to change. Now go to the next, please. We can add some vulnerability detection. For example, we can scan if some parameters are set correctly, that not an auto import is done, for example, to have an easy part, or that the some ABAP measures, code measures are activated. We'll come later to this point, and so on. We can check this. We can make some code scanning and so on, just to get a better understanding. Is there some threat? And the vulnerability detection, and the last level will be the threat detection, where you can make in real time some analysis. Is there something which is attacking my system right now? And only if you have these full layers, you will get the full picture. And especially if you go next, the two top layers. Can you click next, please? The two top layers are the transport scanning we are talking about in this part, because it's the layer which is most powerful to get to get a full picture of this. Next, please. What I want to show you now is what is the capabilities of the SAP built-in tools, where you can make some transport control, some transport scanning, but it's only a little bit limited. But let's start. So next. The first layer, as we already know, is the development system. For sure, with the SAP built-in tools, you can enable an role-based access control. You only entitle the user groups which need the access and don't give everyone access. The second tool, which is really important to use to get more powerful security defense, is the ABAP test cockpit, ATC, which makes code checks before you export some transport. For example, is some critical changes done, some database access which is not committed, and so on. And with this layer, you have a first line of defense for the development system to get a first threat detection. Next, please. On the other hand, for the QA and production system, you can maintain security critical objects. It's transaction STMS, TCRI, and you can maintain there some objects to block their import. For example, you could block some so-called XPRA. It's some report which is automatically executed after importing. And you could say, I don't want such a thing in my system, and so you block it completely. So you can add another layer of protection here. And at the end, you can make generally introduce a well-configured charm, for example. This charm allows you to add way more detailed control, what is allowed, who is allowed, do I need a 4 eyes principle, for example, and so on. And this allows you a way more detailed control about the life cycle of a transport. However, if you go next, if you have someone who exactly know what he's doing, and yes, the authorization especially, he can always, for example, switch off things or just shift around some things, and so he is always able to go around the security measures.
Yeah, Clemens, Ralph, this was until this point very interesting. So I'm now the guy knowing exactly what to do. And for instance, I know that you have an automatic ATC scan active during export in the development system. So I'm a developer and I know the table where to put the flag that it is deactivated. So it also takes me only 25 seconds to do that. Or I would just add something critical to a transport. Would you have any chance to detect what I am also changing in the configuration in the system in combination with what's in the transport?
Not really with the built-in tools. We cannot see that you just added something, just shifting around.
Yeah. So would be really interesting to learn what would be the benefits about the add-ons you provide with your solution to get the idea, the impression how customers can detect it, what's going on there, and also to prevent it. Could you explain it?
Yeah, sure. Can we go next just to get a little bit more in detail? Because we have something which helps here really a lot. Can you go next? Our path log transport scanning first enhanced the standard functionalities. Everything you saw before, you can use still with our tools, and we just added some more layers. Especially the combination of the path log vulnerability and threat detection allows us to make some real-time transport scannings and some self-monitoring. This means at the moment where you change something, you will raise an alert flag, and we exactly know, oh, someone changed something. And at the moment, you can define as the administrator or who else how we react. For example, we just block this user or whatever the reaction will be. And so you cannot only shift around this flag and switch off the export control for a moment. And if you go next. This means in the development system, we provide you some real-time threat detection, including just the self-monitoring that the vulnerability scanning is active, that we have the code scanning active, that we have a transport scanning active, and we extend the transport scanning itself before the export. For example, for other types of transports, the ATC itself only is working for workbench requests. And we also extend this, for example, for customizing a table of contents, table of copies. And so we increase this chance that we have to stop this on the export level. However, if some transports, for example, you change the content on the file layer, comes to the import, we also have another layer. Next, please. And this NASAP layer in the production system is also real-time threat detection and vulnerability scanning active. We detect if something is changed and so on. And we also have here an extended scanning before import, which allows us to detailedly describe which kind of content is allowed to go into the system and which not. And if we see something, we have some test cases which give you an overview about, is it a little bit, is it a possible threat? Sorry, or is it just some content we can go or let it in? Just to sum this a little bit up about our transport scanning solution, I have on the next slide a little summary. Oh, yeah, first I wanted to say, even if you know what you are doing, you will have some traces behind you, and you cannot change or switch off everything without any trace. And this is the point. If you have some automatic reactions or some team which is watching the alerts, it's not possible that someone can, even if he knows what he's doing, just go and bring the content like he wants from the dev system in the follow-up systems. But now I want to sum up a little bit what our path log transport scan is able to offer. First, like I said, we enhance the standard functionalities. This means that you have, for example, today something in place. This will work still, and we just enhance this whole thing. Especially if we combine the path log vulnerability and threat detection capabilities to have such a real-time transport scanning. We allow you some CM integration interface for a fast reaction and follow-up capability. We have an extended scanning before and after, before export and also before import. And we not only scan development objects, but also content. For example, if you want to ship a user, if you want to ship an assignment of roles and so on, we are on a very detailed level than the substandard allows you. Next point, like I mentioned before, very important to have such a self-monitoring to ensure all scan capabilities are running and not just switched off. Our rule set contains more than 100 test cases, and we are always updated this one with our security experts to ensure the highest level of security. And last but not least, you as a customer are free to customize this rule. You can add your own rules, and so you are completely free to extend this solution. So that's my point for the path log transport scan. Let's go please to the last slide of today, just to give you a lessons learned sum up. First, SAP transports are a powerful tool. I guess everyone knows this, but it's also a threat if you do not monitor it closely. It's easy to misuse transport for an attack, like you said, and like you saw in the demo. It's easy just to transport this hash, for example, and you are can take over a user. These are built-in tools are used for a first line of defense. They are powerful, but it's not a comprehensive shield you can build with this. However, the path log transport scans extends the standard and gives you especially a real-time transport defense layer. This solution can be integrated into other tools, for example, the CM solutions, and you can enhance this rule set we provide, but it's also constantly updated by our security experts. So far, that's from my side. I hope you got some new points, some interesting part, and I will switch over to the Q&A. This should be the next slide, yes.
Yeah, Clemens, I think we have already received several questions, and I think thanks first of all for this deep overview. And I think one of our first questions, what I see is how can one person have basis and developer access? Question mark. There should be SOD. Yes, correct. And for our example here, it is not so. In the example, Clemens was doing the change in the transport and the export import, of course. Normally, it is not required to do this hack. It is just required that the developer can add something to a transport, and that is what every developer can. So he's just waiting that any transport basis guy, colleague is just releasing it. So the Trojan is already in, and it does not require that the attacker has any access in the next system on basis level. He's just placing the Easter egg to the basket and is waiting until the transport is in. Once this is in, then you can use the password or whatever type of attack one wants to do with such a scenario. There is another scenario, another question, also in the question line. if I would call a role display, but I put something like a sub all inside a role, can you detect it that there is a Trojan in the role? On the first hand, the solution can detect that there is, on the one hand, a role in the transport. So some customers also have some blocks that if a role is in the development transport, this is not allowed. On the other hand, we can scan how many objects and critical authorizations are within the roles which are on the way, on the level where the roles are created, the sending side and on the receiving side, and at the moment where you assign the role to a user. So also the tool can detect role assignment with critical permissions and also reference user assignments. So whatever type of tricks you want to play to transport a reference user assignment, a reference user to DEDIC, or to fake a role, there's a very, very high chance that one of our checks is detecting this misbehavior and is warning the administrator that something suspicious is in the basket. And the question, also one question is our question is, if I use the solution manager to control the transport, can you fake me? Yes, you can. So whatever type of mechanism you are using, Clemens, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm use Charm or Solman, it doesn't matter, because if there are no scanning rules for the blacklists and the enhancements, there's just the question if the transport is approved in the Charm process. But if I would fake the transport in a way that I put a password hash with is a certain way to a transport, I've never seen a customer with a rule and the ability to detect it. Did you see such customers, Clemens, being able to do it with a standard?
The main problem is, I guess, you could block all tables, for example, and if you block the table content, then you are able or not able to do this. But on the other hand, this is often not configured like this. This is our first point. And the second point is it's always possible to bypass this with the standard. There are several ways. Don't want to go too much in detail here to bypass this as a developer if you exactly know how to do it. And this is not covering with the standard, even with Charm. This easy example we provided is also blockable by the standard things you can get in Solman.
Yeah, fine. There's a question if it is available for the GCTS, the extended solution. Yes, it is, because the connection points and the links are also available in the extended or in the GCTS scenario. So this standard, let's say, check facilities with Charm or with the body integration is available in the global.
Ralph, can I add something? I think CTS means here Git. CTS, doesn't it?
Yes, or I know this this extended CTS where they also can ship the. So the question would be
CTS Plus.
Yeah,
but it's a Git enabled, like Mr. Winkler said. I'm quite sure it will also work for the Git, but we have to clarify a little bit. It's not our main target here yet. This we have to clarify a little bit.
Yeah, we have to clarify it. So the extended CTS, yes, the GTS, yes, so we send an update on it, because I don't also know, actually no production customers using it. There are some customers trying to work with it, but it's not productive until the production.
It comes more and more people use it because it's a really powerful solution, but we have to check it and give you an answer later.
Yeah. So there's a question, what are the access rights to import a transport to the final system? So first of all, it's the transport object. You need a permission to add it to the buffer and to start the import. And there are two ways, or there are multiple ways to trigger an import. The official way is use transaction STMS, use the button add to buffer import. And in that combination, you need the authorization STMS and the transport object to add it to the buffer and perform the import. You can do it in a way that you just put the Trojan to a transport and you wait that some other person is importing the transport. So not the attacker does not need to have the import permission. It's just putting it somewhere in a project transport and is waiting. There is also a way to misuse the transport system in a way that you start, let's say, available background functions in the system, misusing the DDIG user to initiate the import via function modules or as system calls. So there are at least 3, 4, 5 ways which are not relying on the STMS mechanism or the SHARM mechanism, which also relies on STMS. There are also ways to do it with OS commands, and if you can reach an OS command, it is required that you have certain permissions, for instance, for ABAP code or for starting external commands, or you just have the Unix permission. So there are multiple ways to do it, but in general, it's the S-transport object if you are inside SAP. Either you have it yourself or you know a user who has the ability. And one trick could be, for instance, to just change the password of a user who has the permission and to misuse the user to import the part. So you can put the Trojan, whatever, in the transport. And we also have a scenario where we have a report in the transport automatically doing the job. So he's just automatically loading another Trojan once imported. So there's a lot of, let's say, possible things. And most of the things cannot terminate it completely by authorizations. But what we put on top is the threat detection. Whenever somebody tries to use another way, we will detect it. So then is the question, I think you can also use RFC to run from dev, same user to production. Yes, also this is also trusted RFC from dev to prod. A lot of things which you can do. You can misuse the DD connection. So I think if we would some brainstorming here with developers or basic colleagues, so we would find 10 solutions to import and transport on an alternative way. So the risk is there. And lessons learned from our perspective is SHARM is a good way to work a little bit against it. But the problem with the SHARM is SAP does not supply the content for the scanning rules. So the customer has a tool available without the content. So most customers are not able to activate the already shipped scenario in a way that it gets useful for security scannings in real life. And that's a pity. That's a good tool. Without the content, you cannot use it. So do we have any further questions?
I believe that's all the questions we have for today. I want to thank our speakers, Clemens and Raf, for their presentation. We have a few announcements to go over before the end of our presentation. We have SAP Insider coming up on Monday. Pathlock is a platinum sponsor at this year's event, so come say hi to us if you're at SAP Insider. Our next webinar event will be Lessons Learned SAP Insider, and that will be a panelist discussion on Thursday, July 28th at 9 a.m. Central Daylight Time. So look out for that webinar event. And with that, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming, and we hope to see you at our upcoming events.